that news conference in Moscow, Idaho, where authorities talked a little bit about the arrest of a suspect in the brutal, horrific killings of 4 University of Idaho students on November 13th. And I just want to recap very briefly, as Whit did, the little that we got there. We do know that a suspect, Bryan Kohberger, has been arrested, 28 years old, in south central Pennsylvania in the Pocono Mountains, about an hour or so south of Scranton, for those of you who know Pennsylvania. And Kohberger was arrested and now is in custody there. He's been charged with first-degree murder. In addition to that, the police chief thanked the public for this. He said they had received more than 19,000 tips, done more than 300 interviews. He said a large part of that was because this case did capture national attention, and it was continually on people's radar screens, which brought in some of those tips, which apparently resulted in this. But as Whit just said, Police Chief James Fry did say this is not the end. This is just getting started. And he asked for more tips. Now that there are, in fact, there's a name out there that people might know, both in Washington State and Pullman, Washington, where the suspect was a student at Washington State University, just 10 minutes or so from the site of the killings in Moscow, Idaho. Maybe people can start building this case because prosecutors will need more evidence to reach that conviction. For more, let's bring in Kana Whitworth in Moscow, Idaho. Kana, you have been covering this from the outset. I know you've spoken to a family member of one of the victims. What's your reaction to what we've heard, and what are the family members saying?
Right, so Terry, we spoke with Steve Gonzalez, the father of Kaylee Gonzalez, who said that they don't know who this man is. And the reason that's their first response is because police have maintained all along that this was an isolated and targeted attack, yet they don't know who this guy is. So they are looking to see how he could have possibly been connected to Kaylee, Madison, Xana, Ethan, anyone in that house or just the house itself. They also said, though, you know, that they're happy and that they're thankful to hear this news today. And there is a lot of news still to come, as you mentioned, Terry, and the chief alluded to this as well, because once he is extradited to Idaho, which could take some time. In fact, the governor might have to get involved if he doesn't come willingly. So once he's extradited to Idaho and appears in court here to face his charges, it's not until then that that affidavit will be unsealed. And once that affidavit is unsealed, we will likely learn a lot more about the particulars of this heinous crime. Right now, authorities still said that they haven't found the murder weapon yet. You remember they said it was this large knife and that each student was stabbed multiple times in their beds, likely asleep at the time of this attack. They are also saying, though, that they have found this white Elantra that they were looking for. And ABC's Aaron Katersky reporting that his sources say they tracked the car to him in Pennsylvania, Terry.
Wow. And Whit, I'm sorry, I just want to pick up, Kenna, with something you were talking to Whit, our colleague Whit Johnson, about, that when they originally put out the bulletin, like, can people help us find this car? Right. Because of the suspects, plural, that they were looking for.
Occupants,
is there any?
Yes.
Occupants, thank you, occupants. What do you make of that?
Right, so that's a really good and important point there, because also the chief didn't say that there had been other arrests, but they did say that they were looking for the occupants of that car because it was there at the time of the murders, and they thought that they could potentially have some information. And so the chief didn't allude to any other arrests being made at this point. Right now, we are honing in on Bryan Kohberger. And for people that are watching that may not understand the layout of this area, you know, he was a graduate student at Washington State University in Pullman. And Terry, you know, that is less than 10 miles away from Moscow. And his apartment right now is surrounded in crime scene tape and being searched. Right.
All right. Kana Whitworth. Kana, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I want to go to Matt Rivers in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, near where the suspect was arrested. Are you learning anything about how this suspect was captured?
Yeah, well, this was a pretty shocking event for this community. It remains a shocking event given how far away we are from Idaho here in the Poconos Mountains in Monroe County in northeast Pennsylvania. It was just up that road behind me. That's a private gated community, so we can't actually go in without the permission of the property management team here. But it was up that road that a team consisting of members of the FBI, Pennsylvania and Idaho State Police, as well as Moscow, Idaho local police. All of those departments represented in the team that went in and made the arrest, that executed the arrest warrant, finding Bryan Kohberger at his parents' home, actually just up that road behind me there. It was in the early morning hours that they executed that search warrant, bringing him to the Monroe County Correctional Facility. That is where he remains at this point, awaiting, we're awaiting news about what he will choose to do with these extradition proceedings.
All right, just getting started there in Pennsylvania. Matt Rivers on the ground there. Thanks very much. Let's bring in former Chief of the San Bernardino Police Department, Jared Bergwan. So we have a suspect, Jared, and one of the things that I was struck by is that Police Chief Fry had said, look, we'd like more tips. This is just kind of getting started. And they are very limited, he also said, in the public statements they can make, given an Idaho State Supreme Court ruling that really, even more than usual, it sounds like to me, limits pretrial publicity that investigators can engage in. And so he asked for more media coverage, looking for more information. Does that tell you that they want to build a stronger case than they have right now, or is that standard procedure, do you think?
Well, I think it's probably a little bit of both, and I agree with you. I've not seen a case where a state was so restrictive on information that could be released, so that's interesting in and of itself. As far as the investigation goes, they are going to need to build a profile of this suspect. They are going to want to paint a picture as to who he is, what his interests are, any pre-indicators that he may have given to other people of his propensity to commit a crime like this. They will look into what he has studied, his academic records, his work history, all of his friends. It will be a fairly extensive investigation to know everything they can about this suspect in this case.
And how tough do you think extradition might be? I mean, I guess he's obviously this young man's going to talk to a lawyer, and the lawyer might say, you know, maybe they don't have a strong case against you. You should fight extradition, or do you think that'll be a problem here?
I would tend to think he's going to be extradited. He might fight it. It might drag it out, for a little bit of time. And his lawyer may very well give him that type of advice. But if they've got a strong enough case to have gotten to this point, and it is now public, I would believe they've got more than enough to extradite him to make him face those charges. It's just a matter of time of when.
Right. So that depends on what happens in Pennsylvania. Let's go to former FBI agent Brad Garrett, who is an ABC News expert on all these matters. One thing I was struck by, Brad, is the reporting that Kana and Aaron Katursky, our colleagues, have, that white Hyundai Elantra was traced to Kohberger. And at least that's our reporting at this point. I mean, that sounds huge, because they seem to have evidence, obviously that video, gas station video, that it was close to the scene at that time.
I think that's right, Terry. And also, you might recall this, the FBI brought in a team of analysts to look at CCTV, I suspect even private home video. They spent a lot of time. So there is a potential that they tracked that Elantra obviously near the crime scene, but then as it moved around, you remember there's a really blurry shot of it by a gas station, but did it head towards Pullman, Idaho? And do they have pictures of that vehicle like going across the state line in or near the residence where he lives, which sounds like it's about, according to Kana, maybe 10 miles away or so. So it is those types of pieces of information in these really difficult cases that will take you to a defendant. And my guess is that was a big piece of figuring out that he may well be the guy who committed these crimes.
It's striking, and I just want to, I guess, state the obvious. If he did cross state lines to commit these crimes, there's a federal interest there. Would that be pursued at all? He's in enough trouble right now, but what do you think of that?
Well, yeah, there would be. There is a possibility. Typically, in a case like this, I'd have to know more. The focus is really going to be in Idaho. They've got him charged with first-degree murder. I don't know if Idaho has the death penalty. I think you'd have to charge him with capital murder for that. We'll have to see. It may not fit the parameters of that. But the point being, the FBI the Idaho State Police and the Moscow, Idaho Police will all sort of funnel their intelligence to that local prosecutor that talked to us a few minutes ago, and he will then ultimately put the case together that will end in a plea, or obviously it will go to trial.
And Brad, I should say Idaho does have a death penalty. It is not frequently used as far as I know, but it is on the books. And obviously, given the nature of this crime, it's one that prosecutors might well consider. And just to follow up on that, on the question I asked Jared Burgwan, that it sounds, given what sounds like a pretty restrictive state Supreme Court decision in Idaho that limits really to almost the bare minimum the statements that pretrial statements that investigators and authorities can make to the public in order to avoid pretrial publicity that might be prejudicial. That request for tips for now that the name is out there, lots of people will know this guy. It sounds like, you know, because public statements can sometimes be part of an investigation, right? To get requests out there, to put certain information out there. It sounds like this is, as he said, this is an investigation that's really just getting started in some ways now that there's a name out there.
Well, yes, but like Kana mentioned earlier, we'll have to look at this probable cause affidavit because it's got to be more than just bare bones. It could be just bare bones, but my guess is it'll give more detail to basically show that they can put him at the crime scene, maybe back to his apartment in the state of Washington, and then ultimately, obviously, traveling back home to northeastern Pennsylvania. It's the little pieces potentially in between of what did the suspect say to fellow graduate students, other folks, prior to and after this murder, and who really knows him. Granted, he's working on, it sounds like, a graduate or PhD degree in criminology or criminal justice. And, you know, how does that play into maybe why he committed this crime? Well, we'll really have to see. But there is a lot of pieces, but my guess is that sounds like they've got a reasonably solid case even at this point.
Well, thank you, Brad. Let me go back to, first, let me read you both. The family of Ethan Chapin, who is one of the 4 victims in this case, stabbed to death in his bed. The Chapin family statement: "We are relieved this chapter is over because it provides a form of closure. However, it doesn't alter the outcome or alleviate the pain. We miss Ethan, and our family is forever changed." They go on to say that over the last 7 weeks, we stood by the Moscow Police Department, FBI, and Idaho State Police, confident that they would solve this crime. So when we received the phone call last night, we congratulated them for their diligent work and service, and we remain grateful to the University of Idaho and Sigma Chi fraternity for their ongoing support. Appreciate the outpouring of kind words from so many others, which we'll need as we enter the next chapter of this nightmare. Today, we marvel at the continued stories about Ethan and the lives he touched in his short 20 years. If we all lived and loved as Ethan did, the world would be a better place. That's from the family of Ethan Chapin, one of the 4 victims in this case. I want to go back to Jared Burgwan on as this case proceeds. You know, it's interesting that they thank the law enforcement authorities who had come under, as I say, such fire, such kibitzing and criticism and Monday morning quarterbacking throughout. This family stayed with them. And I just want to ask you about the emotional and psychological piece of this for investigators, for authorities. You know, the case will be styled "The People of the State of Idaho" against Christopher Kohberger. But it's also these particular people, isn't it, in your mind and heart as someone who's leading a police department, for example?
Well, it is. And we know that leadership of the department, and undoubtedly the lead detectives, have had a lot of contact with the families, have shared information with the families, have told them everything that they could tell them. And in the process of doing that, you can't help but to form a relationship and to form somewhat of a bond. And, you know, sometimes those things can be contentious. Sometimes there can be tension. But most of the time, there's a relationship that's formed that will last forever. And it sounds like in this case, that family is appreciative of their efforts and what the department did for them.
Absolutely. And they're in the long, hard journey that they still have ahead through the criminal justice system. I know that the authorities in Idaho and at the federal level as well will be standing with these victims, as really we all will be. So Jared Bergwan, Kana Whitworth, Matt Rivers, Brad Garrett, thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.